Hello and welcome, Exile. I think I have enough information to make my decision on what class I'm going to start. And it's gonna be the Sorceress. Everything I've seen, it just seems to take the cake in terms of best potential. And for me, one of the most fun looking classes to play. Just looking at the fireball explosions with the projectiles going outward, looking at the different skills they showcase with ball, lightning, with spark, with comet. A lot of the skills they're big, they're flashy, they're exciting, and I'm pretty pumped about it. Not only that, I think there's scaling to back it up. Number one is the base ascendancies classes they've shown us. Stormweaver is just generically strong so far from what we've seen. We have a cast on crit ability, and we have the ability to do a double shock. And we have 7 nodes that are not known yet. So this seems like it just has really good potential just out of the gate. And the Chronomancer, on the other hand, although I'm not as pumped or thrilled about the nodes they've shown us 3 skill abilities, which I'm not convinced are going to be the strongest. They do look like they could be pretty fun. And then there is potential for the nodes they haven't shown us to be good. It's just sort of the more you don't know, the more there's a chance there could be a really, really good node hidden within these. And I just want to wait and see what that is. So point number one, skills look exciting, and ascendancy nodes, there's decent ascendancy options with Stormweaver and Chronomancer. Offhand chance it could be really good with just maybe these 4 points here are all just really banger nodes. We don't know. Point number 2 has to do with scaling. Of all the classes I've seen, I kind of think the Mana Int Archmage archetype it's pulling away with the freest damage out of all the classes. The reason number one is trigger skills mostly synergize with spells. And if you're playing a spell-based character, if you have all these extra triggers as extra options, they give you essentially maybe a large portion of additional damage being dealt. If I'm triggering a comet every like 5 casts of my faster casting ability, that could be up to 40% more damage, 50% more damage. Maybe I'm triggering a duration skill, whatever it is. Triggering spells is very powerful, so you have that synergy. Number 2 is, I think, as far as I can tell, the Int Mana archetype has the freest damage multipliers of the tree. I'm going to look at these 2 nodes right here. Pure Power, 2% damage per Int, and the other node, which is 3% damage per 100 mana. Between these 2 notables, these are the most sizable percent damage increases, I think, on the entire tree, and they synergize together because in order to scale mana effectively, you're going to want to put Int on a lot of your gear pieces, so they're just like, they have a perfect pairing. Not only that, Archmage, this buff out of all the reservations seems by far and away the strongest. For every 2,000 mana, you're looking at 100% gain damage is extra, which is just kind of crazy. 2,000 mana, I believe, is going to be very, very easy to hit. But I believe what could be more realistic, I think we're going to see builds that have 3 to 4 to 5,000 mana. And then potentially, if you can figure out a way to make Eldritch Battery work, if it works the way it says and it isn't changed on release, then maybe you could even shoot for 6, 7, 8,000 mana could be a potential number, which makes this node go heavily up in value as well as this go heavily up in value. And both of these things are kind of separate of each other, but they multiply together in terms of the final result you're going to get. Percent damage increases and the gain damage are separate things, and they're both very powerful. So that's point number 1. You have a lot of percent damage you get in terms of just specking a few nodes on your tree that are right next to each other. The 2% per 10 int is right here, and the 3% per 100 mana is right here. They're like 10 points away from each other, and they're in a very condensed, important part of the tree. Not only that, if you notice, I was hovering over the Whispers of Doom keystone. This is right here as well. I want to point out that I believe, I guess Blasphemy support is probably in the Spirit Gem section, but Blasphemy seems very, very good. From what I can tell, it's a 30 spirit per socketed socketed curse, which means if I want to go dual curse, I could easily go Enfeeble and Tempt Chains, or I could go, let's say, Enfeeble plus like Conductivity, target some like res, something like that. I can't see it being not a no-brainer. For 30 spirit, based on the other reservations I've seen, it's very powerful. And let me point out to the power of the curses we're dealing with here. Enfeeble, just as a good example, is nutty. 16% less damage to unique enemies at level 3. This is crazy powerful. I'm guessing maybe at level 20, maybe it goes up to 20. maybe even 25% less damage in terms of a DR source. This is insane additional tank. And then not only that, there's curses like Temporal Chains, which slows all enemies by 34%. The amount of ability or time addition you have to dodge or get out of dangerous attacks goes up tremendously when you're making an enemy this much slower. If you've ever played PoE where you have a 30% slow on a boss, you know what I'm talking about. That's no freaking joke. So to me, that makes Whispers of Doom a no-brainer. So right out the gate, I see a lot of condensed power in your tree, all really close together. That's a very important part of making a strong character, is if you have very efficient points. And Whispers of Doom, the damage per nodes all being right here, that's just a perfect recipe for power. On top of that, I also want to point out, some people may have said, Lance, how do you know you can get good ES numbers? What makes you think that the ES numbers are going to be the same, etc., etc.? I've heard that quite a few times. Let me break it down for you. Number one is your source of ES is dependent on the bases you have. So if you look at here, this is the PoE2 site right now. We showcase on this character 4 energy shield specific base types. I went through and I looked at every single one of these base types, and I'll show you a boot example right now. This is a level 33 pair of boots. If you look at the PoE1 boot section on ES boots, you'll notice Scholar boots roll from 23 to 25 flat ES at level 32. And they don't get to 38 ES until about Conjurer boots. The average of the Conjurer boots is about 38 ES or Nightwind. These are level 50 boots. If you compare that to the PoE2 site, these are level 33 boots and they have 38 ES. My point being is all the bases here are either on par or higher ES than their counterpart ES base in PoE1. And the point is, if you make a level 30 base that has 38 ES, the level 50 base is not going to have 38 ES. The number is going to scale. They're not going to make a low level base be the same as a high level base. Essentially, what I'm trying to communicate here is the ES gear is, as far as I can tell, at the very least on par with PoE1 ES gear. And also, I believe the bases, they are going beyond level 68, maybe even to level 90. And the reason for that is, from what I could tell, is skill gems scale up to level 20, and at level 20, they have a level 90 requirement. In PoE1, level 90 or level 20 gems have a level 70 requirement. This is a notable change, but it kind of makes sense because you don't really hit a level 20 gem until you've killed enough monsters to be level 90. So they're probably just making it more on par with, by the time you have the XP to get the next level of the gem, you're like, 5 levels higher or whatever it is. Anywho, what I am seeing here is I'm seeing the potential for there to be maybe level 90 ES bases. Not 100% sure, but it's maybe theoretically there. But aside from the theoretical, if you go to, I don't want to skip around and lose this place of the video, so I'll just showcase you this right here. ES does roll on jewels up to 15%. This could be a 12 to 18% roll, we don't know, but the point is there's good ES numbers on jewels, and I'll come back to that later because percent ES matters. But if you go to the part where they show ROG in this open worlds game PoE2 demo showcase, you'll notice here in this base re-rolling section that there are level 75 bases. Mainly they hover over a chest piece that is a hybrid armor ES chest piece, which has 1 max res, and I guess it doesn't want to load for me. But anyways, there is a chest piece in this showcase here that they hover over. We'll see if I can pause it correctly when he hovers over it here.
But once you find something that you want to kind of...
You'll see he has a level 75 chest piece. So there's clearly bases that go beyond level 70, and I would wager to bet there are bases that go up to level 90. What this means is the amount of base ES you can get on gear is probably on par with PoE1, maybe even higher. I would just wager, let's say PoE1 for I guess, generalization's sake. But anyways, another point I want to showcase as well is if you go a little bit further into this video, when he scrolls over, he hovers over an ES chest piece. You'll notice this ES chest piece has a roll that says 107% increased energy shield. That is on par with a T1% energy shield roll in PoE1, which means the percent increases you can get on gear is on par, or for all we know, this is like a tier 2 or tier 3 ES roll and you can get more. We don't know. There's a lot of throwbacks to stuff that was similar to what we saw in PoE1 really early, like some of the things like Eldritch Battery is a throwback to the very old version of Eldritch Battery. For all we know, they might throw back to the old ES roll rangers where you could roll up to 150% ES. We don't know, but I'm going to theorize that this, let's just say the T1 is comparable. I have also seen a flat ES roll of, I believe, 88 energy shield in PoE1. The flat ES roll you can get up to is 100 flat. I think that means roughly the ES rolls could be comparable on gear. I'm saying all this to say, essentially, the flat ES number you can end up with a chess piece looks like it can be comparable. In PoE 1, you can get anywhere from 2k to 3k flat ES if you have well-rolled ES gear pieces, a shield, body armor, a helmet, boots, gloves, stuff like that. So, point number 1, base ES, you can get to 2 to 3,000. Point number 2, percent ES scaling on the tree is massive. I showed you the jewel that rolled up to 15% ES. Now, let me give you a little bit of the rundown of the ES nodes on tree. This notable right here, 30% ES. This notable right here, 28% ES. This notable right here, 40% ES. There's a notable up here by that lightning area where I said, hey, there's a bunch of good nodes. It's literally right here, 60% ES. And it's not like the small nodes next to it are a joke either. When you look at the small nodes, 15% ES, 15% ES. And it's not just the basic nodes that are just percent ES. It's also the hybrid nodes. This node right here, I'm pretty sure is 20% ES, 20% evasion. And I even remember when I was looking at a Bad Shira video, a small armor energy shield node was 12%, 12%. I'm saying all this to communicate the access to percent ES, even though we don't have percent ES scaling with intelligence, is large. We're looking at somewhere in the range of 300 to 500% increased ES, I believe is fairly realistic with 20 to 30 points invested on your tree, and that could get you to that level of percent ES scaling. Now, if you have 400% ES and you have 3k base ES, guess what? All of a sudden you have a build with 15,000 energy shield. That's no joke, and that's not a number that life builds are going to be able to compete with. So, I'm making my point for how much ES you can get and why that's strong. Now let me move on to another point entirely. Besides the fact you can get good ES gear, you can also get, I mentioned earlier, the gain is extra and the percent damage. You can also get damage multipliers like Sigil of Power, which at 4 stages gives, what is that? 64? No, I can't count. 66% more? No, 56% more damage. There's multipliers like this in the game on top of those other ones, which just are going to stack. And you can stack all these things, Archmage, Sigil of Power, this percent damage scaling. The thing you're missing is cast speed. From what I can tell, cast speed's kind of rare to get. Not a lot of I've seen on the tree, or at least in Dreamcore's video and the videos I've seen, people have not showcased them speccing cast speed nodes, so I don't really know how much there is on the tree. But you have all these base hard hitting nodes. What can you follow that up with? You can follow that up with skills that have a duration. Connor made this point in his stream last night when I was just chilling, and I think it was a great point, which is duration skills deal a ton of damage, and they don't have the orb condition. In PoE 1, they specifically balanced Archmage skills by not letting them be used with orb tagged skills, because the hard downside of Archmage is, here's a bunch of extra mana cost attached to your skill at the baseline, but we're not going to let you use it with the skills that you cast once and they last for 5 seconds, because that'll give you a lot of damage for one singular cast. So the idea is you can use something like Firestorm in PoE 2, and it doesn't have the limitation where you can't use it with Archmage, and that will work for Firestorm, that'll work for Lightning Storm, and these are skills that hit. This is a 10-second duration skill, which can hit the same enemy every 0.4 seconds, so that's about 25 times. So you can cast a skill that's going to hit the enemy 25 times over the course of its duration, and you can layer these things together. You don't necessarily have to spam cast where you might delete too much of your mana too fast. You can do a Lightning Storm, then a Firestorm, run around a bit type of thing. It encourages a playstyle where you get to cast these hard-hitting skills that have this big duration where they deal a lot of damage, and their base downside is, hey, we have a pretty big mana cost initially, and that base initial mana cost doesn't really matter in the context of Archmage, where every single skill is getting the 5% of your mana as added flat, and it means the difference between a Orb of Storms, let's say, which is 23 versus 44, if 5% of your mana is 200 mana, then it's 244 mana versus 223. The difference between these skills is no longer one skill to cost twice as much, but rather they both cost pretty much about 5% of your mana plus a little bit of a negligible amount that doesn't matter. So some of the downsides of these big duration skills gets nullified. I don't know if I'm making my points very clearly, but I'll give you a little write-up as well of basically some of the thoughts I have when I've been looking at these characters. Some of the things that I could perceive as issues. Outright, base EHP is very high. If you scale into a decent amount of ES and then a decent amount of mana, they have to kill your whole ES pool, and then they have to kill your whole mana pool to kill you. That's a large amount of time for you to maybe duck out of some big damage, proc your recharge, stuff like that. Not only that, there's some easy raw mitigation like Enfeeble. We don't really know a lot of mitigation sources that are available. Like, we don't know we don't know what the formula is for armor or evasion. We don't really know how accessible max res is on gear. There's a lot of like missing like question marks of terms of mitigation, but I would wager there's probably going to be at least a couple sources where we can spec into or invest into gear wise, which should give us some more mitigation. But right out the gate, having the potential to get something like 15k ES and 5k mana and then a 25 DR like Enfeeble, that already puts us at a pretty tanky threshold that I would wager the devs haven't really balanced the bosses around being able to deal that much damage, at least not in a one-shot mechanic for the most part. We'll see if I get skill checked on that one. Avoidance, I'm thinking block seems reasonable. I know they showcased a weapon like this that says +5 lightning, 100 mana, 119% spell damage, gain is extra. And you might think, holy crap, that's insane. But I gotta be honest with you, I am more impressed with the scepters, which have spirit reservations, along with free auras, along with the potential. We'll see. I'm hoping scepters can roll, like, they can at least roll mana. I'm hoping they can roll other relevant stats for a solar player on top of using a shield. I really think a shield with block, higher ES scaling is going to do us a little bit better than a staff will, mainly because staff is a big loss in defenses. I'm looking around for my thing and I'm like scrolling through the tabs, but it's right here. So anyways, I'm thinking potentially a staff might be bait and I could see shield scepter making sense. We'll see. It really depends on what's the roll ranges, what can we get on shield, stuff like that, but I'll look into it. Recovery is going to be, as far as I can tell, investing in a mana regen nodes for sustaining our self-cast. In this video, the Sigil of Power powers up pretty quickly, which means this guy is I think in the video, he powered this up over the course of maybe 8 seconds while dodging for half of the time. So he was spending like 50% mana per second, and he was able to afford the casting. So he invested into mana regen, and it seems like the sustain was decent. We don't know how much he spec'd on his tree or how much he had on gear, but it seems reasonable to invest in mana regen. That might just be the way to do it. There could also be potentially some cheese factor with, if you look at, I guess I don't have the support gems open, but I was going to say, if you look at something like Essence Harvest, maybe there's something where you could proc a Summoning Raging Spirits and have those die to proc you mana recovery. That might be potential. There could be some cheese there. We'll see. But the point is, initially, I'm thinking it's going to be probably mana regen for mana. ES, Zealot's Oath kind of got killed for ES, and it's probably going to be based around ES recharge. There is no Ghost Reaver from what I've been told. So ES recharge, investing in those nodes is going to make sense. ES recharge in PoE 1 is a little bit of a meme, but I think it's going to make more sense in the context of PoE 2, where they're not balancing the game around us having constant instantaneous movement skills, which means enemies are easier to dodge. There's probably going to be less chip damage, and recharge is going to be, in my opinion, probably stronger in that context. Granted, they killed the recharge time. They took it back from 2 seconds to 4 seconds, so it's a slower recharge time. But I still think it's going to be a lot stronger feeling in PoE 2 versus PoE 1, but we'll see how that goes. Technically, you could grab Eternal Youth and use a Life Flask on your ES pool, but I think ES recharge is going to be a better route. Next up, there's potential to do things like recover on block percent with Aegis. There's a node on the tree in the Bad Cheer video he hovered over. So there could be some recovery on blocks, sorts of situations you go for. We'll see if that ends up being a thing or not. Other things are reducing enemy speed with like something like Temp Chains. Depends if we want to go DPS for like a Res Curse or Temp Chains for a Make the Enemy Not Move curse. We'll see. And then just looking at generic damage scaling stuff, the duration-based skills, the ability to inflict critical weakness with like Eye of Winter or a Malice Aura, and then, of course, the things I mentioned earlier within scaling, percent damage scaling, Archmage. Anyways, that's just kind of my base level thoughts of why I'm thinking Sorceress for the PoE 2 launch. I'm fairly convinced it's going to be a fun time. There's a lot of fun-looking spells. I've been going through the PoE 2 DB. Fireball looks like a lot of fun. Spark looks like it could be solid. Those duration skills, I think, have a lot of potential with Archmage setups. And a lot of these trigger things, like the cast on crit skill in the Stormweaver, or even the cast on crit, cast on ignite, cast on shock, all these trigger supports for reservations seem like they could be a lot of fun. And I am just really pumped about it. So anyways, that's my thoughts on my starter for Path of Exile 2, I think I'm going to go Sorceress. Of course, as we get more details, who knows? They could drop this banger teaser of something that makes me change my mind again, but I don't think I'm changing my mind. I've gone back and forth over a few different options, but I think I'm fairly settled in the Sorceress, Archmage, in scaling, ES scaling plan, and that's what I'm probably going to go for. And hopefully, if we get more information, like for example, if they do give us the passive tree, if they do give us more Ascendancy nodes, stuff like that, then maybe I can give you guys more of like the plan I do for the plan I have for like pathing my tree or things like that. But who knows? I think they're going to have us going kind of blind, and most likely the last thing we're going to get before the PoE 2 launch is maybe a data mine tree like the day of or something that we'll hastily look through a couple hours before launch, and then we'll have more time to look through when inevitably the servers crash and we got nothing to do but look through the tree for a few hours while the servers recover. Who freaking knows? But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed. As always, thanks for watching, Exiles. Take care and peace out. Have a good one.